Hello, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. Now, listen, I want to talk about something that's very, very dangerous to the world's financial system. Believe it or not, it's cryptocurrencies. We've watched cryptocurrencies since it first began, back in 2008, 2009. 2009, I think, is when it really started with Bitcoin, was the original. And, it was almost like a joke, it was like a penny a piece, or something like that. At first, you could set up an old Pentium computer and you could mine there was a computer actually running before Bitcoin was anybody even knew about it, that was mining Bitcoins. And it mined like 1 million, but I picture it in my mind probably as some old computer, but it didn't take a whole lot of processing power. You could mine with a central processing unit on your computer, and with an old Pentium computer, and solve blocks. And back then, I think the blocks were 100 or 50 or something like that. But they keep reducing the size of the block and the size of the reward. That's called a block halving. And basically, what they do is they cut the number in half of the amount of Bitcoins when you solve a block, when the computer solves a block. And of course, the more miners are on the network, the harder it is to solve a block. And so typically how they solve blocks is they link computers or mining power together in what's called pools. So they pool their resources. They pool their computers into tremendous mining power in a pool, and they solve these blocks, and they get the Bitcoins as a reward. It's very much like, and that's why they call it mining, it's very much like mining anything else, like if you're mining gold or you're mining silver. But Bitcoin differs in the respect that it is absolutely set in stone how much Bitcoin they're able to mine off the internet, and that amount gets less and less every 4 years, when they say, hey, we're only going to give half the reward as we gave 4 years ago. So they're going to keep doing that every 4 years. And it's the same way with a number of other coins, like Litecoin works exactly the same way. And so this is what's going on, is we've got something that was created back in 2008, 2009, after the last financial crisis, that is growing now to almost $1 trillion industry. What I'm going to say to you guys next is I've done a lot of work in this, trying to figure out what net effect this has on the financial system. And I have to put things into illustrations to try to, so that you can form a picture with your mind to understand how this actually functions or works. Picture people's bank accounts. Picture cash as liquidity in people's bank accounts. Picture that like a tank of water, Now, the money is sitting in somebody's account. They might be a billionaire. They might have $800 million sitting in an account. That money has a net velocity of 0. It's not moving. It's like the water inside a tank. So picture a giant tank sitting up maybe on tank legs, and it's got a hose coming off of it, or a pipe leading off to it to drain the water off. And it's got a valve on there. So the owner of that bank account would pick up the phone, or he would use his computer mouse to tell that liquidity to come out if he wanted to purchase something. The liquidity to come out of his account, and then that money would go into action. So that's the way with Bitcoin. If you picture these thousands of millionaires out there, millions actually of millionaires now at this point, and billionaires, out there. And there's a lot of billionaires out there now too, There's thousands of billionaires. That's a lot of liquidity being stored in a lot of different tanks. So you get tanks all over the place. And these tanks represent the money that's being held, that these people have they've worked hard for it. Let's face it, even if they're a billionaire, they've worked hard for their money. It's been a long time saving up that much money and getting that much money, and billionaires don't have to work as hard for it, but still they have a certain mental philosophy, they have a certain regiment that they follow and everything else, and they have to do certain things in order to get their money, and we have to work harder for it, us normal people, but still, money requires work. Money is effort. And so all these tanks, different size tanks, some of them are smaller, representing a smaller bank account. Some of them are larger, representing a bigger bank account, all containing this liquidity. Now, say a person wants to buy some Bitcoin. Say he's got a big tank. Well, he climbs up on top of his tank, and he grabs a valve, and he opens the valve, and the liquidity pours out of his bank account. And say he's buying Bitcoin, it goes directly into the Bitcoin. It's like it flows down the pipe, the money, and heads toward a unit where the money is processed into Bitcoin. Well, when he does that, the Bitcoin price goes up. But what about the value of the money that he used to purchase the Bitcoin with? Where does that money go? Does that money cease to exist after it's purchased the Bitcoin? No, it doesn't. The money now, you remember, when it was in the tank, being stored away in dollars, it had a net velocity of 0. So it wasn't moving. It wasn't exchanging hands. The velocity of money to the economy is extremely important. It's an extremely important factor. It basically indicates how fast is money exchanging hands within the economy. Is it sitting in a bank account where it have a velocity of 0? Or is it being used in the general economy to purchase goods and services and buy commodities and so on? Then it would have a higher velocity. So once money starts to move, once it's let out of the tank, then it starts to be used, and it increases the velocity of that money. As soon as that money leaves the bank account and goes to purchase a Bitcoin, the velocity of the dollar goes up. So now, the Bitcoin itself, the people that are buying Bitcoin are a massive army of HODLers. So when a person lets the money out of the bank account, he buys a Bitcoin with the price of the Bitcoin goes up, but that Bitcoin is very likely going to exchange hands, and then it's going to become the new savings for that person that had their savings before in dollars. They're not likely to spend it. How many people do you see say, oh, gee, today I'm going to go out and buy $1 million worth of Bitcoin, and I'm going to use it to buy coffees and lattes with at Starbucks? Doesn't happen. No, they buy the Bitcoin, they put it in an offline wallet, and there it sits with a velocity of 0. This is deflationary for Bitcoin. They're deflating Bitcoin. This is why the price is going up, and this is why you've got an army out there of people who are holding it and not really using it that much. So the network is pretty much secure, even though it's only capable of 7 transactions per second. And when we're talking a worldwide transaction network, 7 transactions per second is very, very small. So the Bitcoin's been purchased. Now that money doesn't cease to exist. It's in the hands of the people who had the coins before. And they are fully well realizing that this is something that's not really an item that you really want to save. That's why the person that had the money before in their bank account took the money out of their bank account and used it to purchase Bitcoin, because they didn't feel secure in holding the fiat currency, which would, in this case, in my example, would be the dollar. That insecurity about holding dollars comes from the very fact that they are actually manipulating the money supply and adding to the money supply, and the actual amount of currency out there in the M1 and M2 money supplies is going up. In fact, going up is an understatement. they've printed more money in 2020 than they did for like 200 years of the early part of America, you know? I mean, it's absolutely unreal how much money they're creating right now. But at the same time, fractional reserve lending is decreasing. Bitcoin is acting as a factor to speed up the velocity of money. But because Bitcoin now and the other cryptocurrencies are in their infancy, they're not that big yet, in other words, what I'm saying. They're basically $700 billion, so it's not quite $1 trillion. 3/4 of the way to $1 trillion. That's not that big in the financial system. So if we look at it kind of like the growth of a tumor or something, you know, it's not that big of a tumor yet. It's not really having too much of an effect upon the overall central nervous system of the financial system itself. But as it grows larger and larger, exponentially larger, it's going to start to have this effect of speeding up the velocity of money. And the net effect of this is, when you speed up the velocity of money within the system, money starts to flow into Bitcoin. This new money creation that the Federal Reserve and all of these other central banks are doing by creating all this new fiat money and putting it into the system, some of it now is starting to be absorbed by the cryptocurrencies. So the more they print, the lower the price goes of what you can purchase with this. The purchasing power of the fiat currency starts to drop. And as that purchasing power starts to drop, at the same time, the cryptocurrencies' purchasing power is going up. So basically, you've got one that's going up higher and higher and higher, while the other one is dropping down lower and lower. And this effect is becoming more and more noticeable to more and more people out there. This is reaching a critical mass. Now, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've been trying to think to myself, where would the critical mass be? At what point does it really get so large that everybody out there says, hey, you know what? I better get my savings into these alternative asset class, get it out of the dollar because the dollar's losing value very quickly, and then there's a mad rush into these alternative asset classes, which would be gold, silver, and cryptocurrencies. Believe it or not, guys, there's only those three alternatives. Your stock market, still all denominated in dollars. So you're not out of the dollar with the stock market. Bonds, equities, it's all denominated in dollars. Mutual funds, money market accounts, everything's denominated in dollars. Even when you buy gold and silver, if you're buying the SLV or the GLD, it's still denominated and it's still settled in dollars. So you're not escaping the dollars. There's only one way to escape the fiat monetary system, and that's real physical gold, real physical silver that you hold in your hand, and cryptocurrencies, and you have to hold yourself the private keys. The best way to hold these private keys is offline, so that nobody can hack into your system. And I don't know if it's still you can still do it or not, but I believe that paper wallets are still viable for Bitcoin. Now, I if you guys have heard otherwise, I do know that they used to be able to hold the private keys on a paper wallet. But I'm not sure if you can still do that or not. I'm just not sure. But I do know hardware wallets are still out there, and that's offline, and it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible for a hacker to hack in and steal your Bitcoins if you're holding the private keys offline. And if the internet goes out, you got no worries. if your private keys are being held offline, it's still going to be there. Now, if the worldwide internet went out permanently, that would be a different story. Because then it would be something where it's very difficult. It would make a situation for the entire world that would be so difficult that I don't even want to go there talking about what would happen if the worldwide internet went down. It would be a horrendous situation. But that's not what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about at what point does this get to a critical mass where all the people out there start to become aware that their purchasing power is being eroded to the point where they say, hey, you know what, I better get out of this fiat currencies and into something else that's out of the dollar. At what point does everybody start to say, in small and large, all of these tanks, picture these fields and fields of tanks representing bank accounts, some of them small, some of them large, that everybody crawls up on their tank and opens up the spigot and lets that fiat money out and tries to purchase something that's out of the fiat currencies. Because when that happens, just in the United States alone, we're talking about, I think, over $20 trillion worth of savings are being held in the fiat currency. At what point do they all panic? Well, I'll tell you, I've been thinking about it a lot, and I think it's probably when cryptocurrencies market capitalizations gets probably up around $3 trillion. So I think we got quite a ways to go yet, and I mean, that's just a guess on my part. I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, at what point does everybody say, hey, these dollars aren't purchasing anything anymore. Last week I went to the store and I bought that and it was 20% cheaper than it is this week. And they all start to panic at the same time, and they all start to run for the gates. I think, myself, what's driving Bitcoin up right now is the precursor to this panic that's coming. I think we're getting the signal now when we're seeing one company alone. I think it's was it PayPal buying all the Bitcoins, and I mean we're looking at supply shortages coming. I believe it's PayPal anyway, but there's more. Square, I think, there's a number of companies out there that just wants to gobble up every Bitcoin that they can actually get, real Bitcoin that they can get. And the miners have no problem. If you're a miner, it's no problem for you to sell your Bitcoin now at this point in time. They'll gobble them up. They'll gobble up all you can produce. So we're seeing the price go up hourly. I watched it tonight cross the 700 billion mark for the cryptocurrency industry, and I haven't seen that since 2017. Yes, it's exciting, but I think it's just beginning, And the flows of money, when it flows through, the money flows through the cryptocurrency and it starts to speed up the velocity. Once it gets up around $3 trillion, it's going to start to have a net effect upon the dollar itself, of really starting to actually see it speed up the velocity of the dollar. And this, in turn, will speed up the economy. Because as money starts to flow out of all these bank accounts and savings and everything, it's going to start to chase real goods and services in the general economy. And that chasing of goods and services means people are going to start selling things more. And so people are going to start buying things more. And businesses are going to see opportunities, and they're going to go into their banks, and they're going to say, hey, I want to take out a loan. Interest rates are low right now, and it's just a matter of qualifying, and the banks overnight could lower these qualification rates down, and the money could start to flow out from the fractional reserve banking system. At the same time, we're seeing this health issue. Probably at that same time, maybe it's 6 months from now, maybe it's a year from now, we're going to see the health issue start to settle back and not become quite so big of an issue anymore. At the same time, we could possibly see the economy start to explode into this thing where, yes, a lot of businesses went out of business. Maybe there's a restaurant on the corner Now it's a vacant building. The windows are all boarded up and everything. But why did they build that restaurant there to begin with? They built it there because it was a good place for a restaurant. Well, when you see this health issue disappear, it's still a good place for a restaurant. And maybe some guy will come in and say, hey, you know what? I can get a good deal on a lease on that building. And I'm going to open up a restaurant there. All the equipment's still there. The kitchen's still there. All the cooking equipment, everything. All I need to do is get a loan from the bank, put some new chairs and tables in there, take the boarding off of the windows, and get the health inspector in. And the first thing you know, I'm up for business. It can happen so quick. It can happen in a couple months. And the new restaurant can be opened up. All going along with the new health guidelines and everything else. The bank can make a loan from that. You'll find that they'll hire contractors in to maybe do a little bit of a remodel, some new gyprock here and there, and a bit of new plaster and paint here and there. The contractors will make money too. You see, as the economy starts to bounce back, and we get projects like that actually starting to happen, and the velocity of money's picking up, this is going to also fuel the cryptocurrencies. Because you're going to find that contractor, he had to buy paint or whatever, so the price of paint will go up. Maybe he had to buy pipes, the price of pipes will go up. You find that there's a bit of a lag in all of these items and things because shipments from China haven't been keeping up with selling, say, the type of conduit that they need to put the electrical system in for this new restaurant. And so maybe they have to pay twice as much or use a different kind of pipe that costs more. You see, but this just all adds fuel to speed up the velocity of money faster and faster and faster. And the cryptocurrencies will feed off of this. So myself, I'm looking at that figure of about $3 trillion cryptocurrency industry, which would probably put the Bitcoin price at exceed 100,000 for the crypto. And don't say, hey, Glenn, you're crazy. That can't possibly happen. Because yes, it can happen, and it can happen rather quickly. I mean, it was just a couple weeks ago, Bitcoin was under 20,000. Now it's like, what is it, 26,000. And it's heading up to 27,000. You know? And we've got the conditions right for this thing to grow bigger. It's almost like a seed that's in the ground. And if you've got the right kind of fertilizer and you're watering it, it's got the right amount of sun and everything, that thing can grow really fast. Okay, listen, guys, you know. The deflation that we're seeing right now that's being caused is from all these restaurants and things closing. And it's all related to the health issue that's going on, you know. And so we've had a bad winter, a really bad winter. We haven't seen the stimulus packages passed yet, you know, and there's an awful lot of people in America who's lost their jobs, and they're finding it rough. But I see this economic recovery that I'm looking at here, and I've been talking about for a while on my channel. I've kind of explained it to you guys tonight, how I see this progressing as the health crisis starts to wane back and the economic recovery starts to take hold probably sometime this summer. I see this as causing a total disaster, because it'll speed up the velocity of money and it'll start the ball rolling into a hyperinflation. Probably sometime around next fall, after it really starts to take root, this economic recovery. And so moving into 2022, we're probably, because of an economic recovery and that kind of conditions in the economy, we're probably going to be looking at good times again. Maybe not quite as good as they were before we had this health issue, but a lot better than this Christmas. Perhaps next Christmas will be a fairly decent Christmas, pretty nice, you know, and there'll be money flowing into the system, because money is what makes everything work, guys. But what about if we start next year with a good Christmas next year and a good start to the new year and everything looking rosy, But as the year progresses, we move deep into a hyperinflation that starts to actually completely destroy the economy. So, I mean, I'm looking at 2022. If we do move into a hyperinflation during 2022, then what we're probably looking at is a rapidly moving hyperinflation that could cause massive problems when it reaches its final conclusion, where the dollar and basically all the other fiat currencies would go to zero. That would be the conclusion. A lot to think about. I know I covered a lot of ground tonight, but thank you for listening to my show. And give me a thumbs up, and we'll catch you guys in the very next episode. Bye-bye.